Hi, guys, and welcome back to a new episode of Las Platicas. Kristen, who is in studio or remote studio today?
Today, in our remote studio, we are welcoming Gabe Cheng. Just as a reminder, Las Platicas is a show hosted by Comadres y Comics Podcast, where we meet with creators and friends to talk about upcoming projects, events, and all around awesome news in the comic community. So, yes, Gabe is joining us today, and this I found very interesting, Gabe. You left a successful career as a high school teacher and moved to LA to pursue your passion for writing and working in entertainment. Now, listeners, you may remember Gabe from our Las Platicas episodes 5 and 16. So he is a fan favorite here of us on our podcast. And he, during those episodes, spoke to us about his project For Molly, a comic about an antisocial talking dog living alone in New Jersey, the New Jersey forest. I gotta tell you, I never even knew New Jersey had forests until I read your books. um, so this dog lives alone in the New Jersey forest and helps a recently divorced outsider rescue his sister from a hidden evil. But today he is with us to tell us about his project Into the Wilderness, which is a story that takes place within the same world as For Molly. So, in that book, after a deadly explosion rocks again the New Jersey forest, a talking dog and her stoic human partner go on the hunt for a killer. So, we're so happy to have you again on our show, Gabe. Welcome.
I'm so glad
Welcome.
to be back. Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Yes, absolutely. So, for those sad listeners who haven't been introduced to you and haven't heard our other episodes, why don't you go ahead and talk to us a little bit about who you are and catch us up on what you've been working on since we last spoke to you?
Well, I mean that pretty much covers it. I'm Gabe Cheng. I used to teach high school. I taught art, video production, and graphic design. I also was a football and a track and field coach. I only coached football for 1 year, but I was a track and field coach for 7 years. And
Oh,
after a
wow.
while, yeah, it was fun. I mean, and now that football is over, I am getting into I mean, the NFL season is over. I'm thinking about like, oh, I would, if I was still teaching, I'd be getting the preseason going with the track team and going out there and getting, teaching the warm-ups and things like that. But
Yeah.
in a previous life, yeah, now I work in entertainment, and I self-publish and write my own comics. I've been doing it for a couple years now. My first graphic novel is almost done. It was a 4-issue limited series, so I'm going to be coming out with a collected graphic novel version of that hopefully this summer, and that is For Molly, as you guys talked about. But I'm also starting to put together a anthology of short stories, which is
Oh,
why I'm here
nice.
today, because because Into the Wilderness is a short story. The last Kickstarter I did was a short story called Love at First Bite, which was about vampires. And so I'm mapping out and planning out my post For Molly life, which, as I said, is coming to a conclusion in the summer, and it's going to be a collection of short stories that I'm working on, and were written. 4 out of 5 of them were written during the quarantine, during the lockdown, and the fifth one
Oh,
is
wow.
still just an amorphous cloud in my head with different quotes and ideas for character designs kind of floating in the ether of my brain. But so yeah, that one will be written very soon. But yeah, other than that, I've just been, washing my hands, covering my face, and cleaning all my groceries when I bring them home, stuff like that. So
I was just telling Sarah before you joined us that it was back in May when everything was still very new. She interviewed you alone by herself because we still hadn't actually like set anything up to do this on an ongoing basis. We weren't even recording our regular show yet. It was the beginning of everything, and that was back when like we were just like, okay, hunker down for 2 weeks and everything will be fine.
yeah, back when
Yeah.
it was a sprint, not a marathon.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. Yeah, it's been, yeah, we were just talking about how it's been a year, like
Yeah.
a
Mhm.
whole year that we've been like on pause. So it's kind of a weird feeling.
Yeah, my company started working from home in the middle of March, like around the time when I'm going to launch my Kickstarter. I think we went home on March 12th. So yeah, I'm
Mm.
coming up on my 1 year work from home anniversary. It's been a crazy year, but I'm very lucky to be healthy and still employed and still kind of figuring it out and still creating. I'm very grateful. I'm not taking anything for granted um, that I'm still writing and able to collaborate with my artists and to come on and talk about it with you guys.
Awesome.
So, just as a side note, I'm interested to know, did working from home and being in quarantine, or not in quarantine, but being on quote unquote lockdown, actually help or hinder the writing process?
Um, I would say that it was about the same.
Okay.
I think that I was definitely I mean, there's a couple of things that I've been, figuring out the whole mental health thing, taking care of it, in tandem with everything else that's been going on. So I've been going on walks every morning and making sure that I'm still exercising and making sure that I'm giving myself time to, to really hunker down and work on day job stuff and really hunker down and work on everything else I'm doing and really. Um, take time to relax too. And so it kind of just was in tandem with everything that was going on and adjusting to everything that was going on and learning to just not be anxious about everything because there's a lot to
Mm-hmm.
be, anxious about. And just, and not, and not taking any moment for granted. Not just thinking like as much as we all still want this to go back to normal. It's like, well, we can't wait for that to happen in order to keep writing, keep doing Kickstarters, keep doing podcasts and things like that. So just not to get too heavy too early in the podcast, but I had two I had a former coworker and I had a fraternity brother, both pass away during the pandemic, not of COVID, of different reasons. But
Wow.
kind of in a nutshell, both of those guys, great guys, passing away was kind of a reminder of like, don't 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 waste the time that you have. And those are two guys that were very, very accomplished and were very, very loved and beloved by their family and their friends, but were taken far too early. So
Mm-hmm.
um so yeah, I mean, yeah, just again, didn't mean to get too heavy too early on, but I was reminded, not just through the pandemic, but through my friends kind of passing, that like, there's a finite amount of time and
Yeah,
don't waste it.
Oh, completely
definitely.
agree. I mean, I saw Screech died and I was like, he was a year younger than me. So I'm like,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it just puts some things in perspective for sure. Well, to lighten up the mood a little bit,
it's a good idea.
yeah, Into the Wilderness is a project that you will be launching a Kickstarter for soon. Can you tell us more about the story and where you got the idea for creating another story arc set in the same world as Formali, as where Formali originated? How did your characters and plot develop?
So Schneider and Caprica, who are the two main characters, Schneider is a human man and Caprica is a dog. She's a border collie. There are two characters from Formali, and I spent a lot of time when I was writing Formali and then when I was reworking it for the comic, thinking up their backstory and thinking up what their relationship was and thinking up what their design would be and who Schneider is based on, as far as the casting, quote unquote. And I had a really I don't want to say elaborate, but I had a pretty like flushed out idea for who he was. He was a lawyer in New York City that decided that he was not being fulfilled by either that profession or living in the city. So when he discovered that there was this hidden world in the New Jersey forest where talking dogs and off the grid humans are kind of living living out there off the grid. He ventured out there and started to live that life, but then almost died when he was caught in a snowstorm, because he was totally inexperienced, didn't know what he was doing. And then he was rescued by Caprica, who is an advocate who is part of the kind of loose association of peacekeepers that keep the peace between that's redundant, but they keep the peace between humans and dogs in the forest. And so she brought him into this world of being an advocate. And then after a certain amount of time of them being together, they run into the main characters in Formali. So none of what I just explained, aside from the snowstorm and being saved by Caprica, is in Formali. And then when I wrote their parts for Formali, I was flipping through. I was like, oh wow, they're only in a handful of pages. They are, they're not really interacting with each other. We don't see the dynamics of this relationship. In the book, we see them interacting with the main characters in Formali, but we don't see them really on their own, because she is an older dog. She is the veteran of the two. She's kind of a mentor to him in that way, because she brought him into this world of the New Jersey forest and being an advocate. So she is the more senior of the two partners, and he's kind of the young buck, and that's what she calls him, kind of young rookie that is still kind of learning the ropes. And again, none of that is really in Formali. So it was like, well, I've spent a lot of mental energy on these two. And so as kind of naturally, as I was thinking for stories for this short story anthology that I'm doing, this one, the idea of just putting them in their own story came up kind of and just kind of clicked and kind of made sense. So yeah, here we are.
Yeah, I really
I
like
have
the
to say,
dynamic.
oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry about
That's
that.
exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, their relationship is very like older mentor, and he's kind of like a little bit impatient at times, I think.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
so he wants to get things done on his own terms, but that's not always the way to handle it, because there are other things that are happening in that community that you can't just bypass. So I really like that. I love that you really there is a lot of character development in your story. So that's really cool.
Well, thank you. Yeah. And as far as like the other part to your question about like what is the story kind of about, what is it kind of based on? It is very much. I mean, when I sat down and started writing it, and it is very much an homage to Batman the Animated Series, where this is kind of a Batman and Alfred kind of story, where it is about him, Schneider, being kind of reckless, kind of leap before looking kind of situation, and that guiding light, that anchoring force reining him back in, and will she be able to do it this time, because he's so hot-headed, because he's so angry about what's happening, at what happened at the beginning of the story.
Mhm.
I definitely saw her as his Mr. Miyagi. And the way that she just kept calling him out on his crap. I really loved that. And just like Sarah, I loved the dynamic of their relationship. And I loved that you took the opportunity to put that into this one shot, because it definitely was worth being told. And I loved being able to see that background and that more in-depth description of who they were as characters. Definitely.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really, like I've been talking about, I really thought a lot about these characters, and in the process really fell in love with them. So I'm glad that I um uh have been able to do this, and I'm very, very grateful for your guys' feedback. Like, I'm grateful that is kind of resonating with you too.
Yeah, definitely. So, with Formali, you had some very successful Kickstarter campaigns. Congratulations on all of those.
Thank you.
And also with your vampire story too, as you just mentioned. But can you tell our listeners about this particular Kickstarter? What will be some of the rewards for Into the Wilderness, and when can we look forward to the campaign actually beginning?
Well, shouldn't bury the lead. The campaign is beginning March 17th, which is a Wednesday. It is St. Patrick's Day.
Nice.
So
Oh,
I'm
that's right. St.
yeah.
Patrick's Day.
So celebrate the Emerald Isle with this book that has nothing to do with St. Patrick's Day, but it was a convenient date for a launch. So but you know, the Kickstarter is going to offer a lot of cool things. Of course, it's going to offer digital and print versions of the comic. It's going to I have some stickers and magnets, both done by an incredible
Love it.
artist named Izzy Cheng, who is also my sister.
I wondered
And
about that. I saw her last name. I was like, I wonder if they're related.
yeah, she is. She's launched her her kind of solo artist career. She's got a very popular Instagram going at Izzy Chang Art. She's got a day job as well, so which she's very successful at. But she's starting her own art Instagram stuff and her own art Etsy. So I'm glad that we're related, because it's going to get to a point where her work is going to be way too expensive for me to afford. Because yeah, she's very talented. I also worked with an artist named Colleen Palmer, who is at Pixel Gremlin on social media, and she did the variant cover for Into the Wilderness, which was super duper cool. And that's getting offered as a reward, not only as just like a print that can come with the book, but also I'll be offering variant covers of the book, the whole book with the variant cover instead of Elisa's main cover. And then for those of people that have not read For Molly but are interested in Into the Wilderness, it's I am giving away For Molly. It's a digital reward that is going to be triggered as soon as the campaign hits its funding goal. Everybody at every level gets the digital For Molly
cool.
1, 2, 3 for free. And unfortunately, 4 doesn't exist yet, but that is forthcoming. And that's also getting the physical copies of the is also one of the reward tiers for the campaign too. So physical copies of For Molly, digital copies of For Molly. So anybody that is interested in reading that, if they contribute to the Kickstarter, will get the opportunity to read it. But Into the Wilderness is a standalone story. You don't necessarily have to know about the characters in For Molly or even what's going on in that story to understand Into the Wilderness. And Into the Wilderness actually takes place before For Molly. So it's not quite a prequel, again, because it's not a continuation of that story, but it takes place before that. You don't need to read For Molly in order to understand it.
Don't listen to Gabe. You need to read For Molly.
Yeah, what am I saying? I have to read For Molly. You need to know the whole thing.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is working with your artist, because your artist is actually not stationed here in the United States. She's an Italian artist, and I wanted to know like how you got connected with her and what's it like working. I mean, in this day and age, it's like old hat. Everybody works with people over the internet now, so I'm guessing it wasn't that big of a deal. But I'm still interested to know like how you met her and how that whole relationship works in a long distance situation like this.
Yeah, she's incredible. Her name is Elisa Menegel. She doesn't have a social media handle, or else I would shout that out. She is in Florence, Italy. It is an 11-hour time difference between me and her, and
Wow.
I'm out here in Los Angeles. I found her on Upwork, which is the freelancer website, where I've had a lot of success finding really great artists. And I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, she's just incredible. She sent me a portfolio when I posted the job, and it fit just perfectly with what I wanted for Love at First Bite. And we had a great time working together. I would send her, I mean, Love at First Bite is a romantic comedy about a capricious young girl named Alina who tries to get back at her ex-boyfriend by becoming a vampire and rubbing his face in it. So it was my kind of like zany romantic comedy. I had a bunch of crazy ideas that were some of them were silly, some of them were kind of dark humor. So I was throwing a bunch of weird stuff at her, like, hey, can you like there's little knee-high demon imps. They're all black. They kind of look like bats. They got claws. And like, and in this one, can you have one dressed up like the Pope? In this one, can you have one like with a little conquistador helmet because he's the guard for the castle? Like, and it's like, oh, and can you like, and in this one, like, can you make Alina flying and like, and you know, can you, and like sending her like, you know, which I do with my other artist Ben Sawyer at Sketch Sawyer for Formali. Like I'll send them facial expressions and I'll send them poses and things like that. So I just really liked working with her as I do with Ben. But yeah, and she was very quick with the turnaround, which was, so I would be sending her art in the afternoon here in LA or sometimes early morning, and then by you know, the time I wake up the next day, I've got art in my mailbox, which was just so exciting.
Wow.
It was like Christmas, you know, for a couple of weeks, and yeah, it was just a great all around experience working with her, and so even though this is like a huge tonal shift from Love at First Bite, I just want to keep working with her as long as possible. So I brought her on for Into the
Yeah,
Wilderness.
I'm looking at some of the art for that we have up here, that you have up in your on your website, and it's so cool. Just this one page of art that was shared here on your website made me want to read this book. And I'm a sucker for, get it? For vampire stories, and the premise just sounded so funny. So we definitely need to, I think, read this on a future episode for sure.
Absolutely. So, Gabe, what advice would you give to creators who are interested in self-publishing a comic? What made your crowdfunding endeavors so successful in the past? So, I guess what kind of advice can you give creators who want to publish their own comic?
I'm still very early on in this, so I'm still reaching out to a lot of other creators, you know, asking that very same question. You know, I've only been at this for a couple of years, and it takes a long time. I would say that um, uh, definitely like the advice that I would give myself going back is kind of what I'm doing right now, which is that if I were to go back and do this again, I would have done a short story anthology first and then moved into a
Mm.
larger limited series or graphic novel, because I am paying for the art up front, and then doing the Kickstarter essentially to pay myself back. Or in some cases, I'll pay up front for the first part of the issue, and then Kickstarter, and then the remaining money I'll pay myself back and pay the artist as we move forward, depending on kind of the production schedule. So my advice for somebody starting out, which would again be my advice that I give myself 3 years ago, is do a small Kickstarter for a small amount, and just get a foot in the door, get something going, and really just get the wheels started, get the momentum going, and go from there. Because that's what I'm doing with the short story anthology. I'm going to, instead of doing one big Kickstarter a year, try to do 2 or 3 small Kickstarters a year, and just kind of keep the momentum going in that way, and still getting the chance to tell a bunch of different stories and fun stories, and some that might cross over a little bit and or hint at each other or Easter egg each other, but don't necessarily, you know, you're not waiting years for the conclusion of the story, which unfortunately, you know, is just how things shook out with Formali, even though, like I said, it's concluding very soon. So yeah, that would be the number one thing to do, is just you know, aside from just doing something to get something out there, to do it, to you know, not be so worried about making it perfect, or be worried about rejection, or be worried about having a Kickstarter that doesn't fund, which is a big thing to be worried about. One of mine
Mhm.
also didn't fund as well. It was very disheartening. and yeah, and I think the other advice that I would give is make something that you would want to read. Make the kind of comic that you would want to read, because that is kind of um, that helps me certainly with like uh, uh, standing behind it, getting passionate about it, like and engaging with people that also read it as well, because that is kind of like a little indication that maybe we're kind of screwy in the same way, or we like the same things, or we have the same sense of humor, and yeah, and it's hard to sell something that you don't believe in. And if you're making something just for the sake of, oh, I think this is what other people want, or this is what somebody else told me to do, then I think that in my case, I'd certainly be less passionate about doing something like that. So make something that you want to read, make you know, and that's the same for podcasts. But I also do a podcast. Like I'm very proud to make a podcast that I want to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of a marker of, you know, I feel like I'm doing a good job, where I feel like this is a podcast I want to listen to. We're making it, and it's and that's kind of that's kind of where you should be. So, and it's the same with comics.
I completely agree
Well,
with you. We keep doing that.
I would say, um, you're kind of giving the comic equivalent of do what you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That was better than me rambling for the last couple of minutes. That
No,
was
but
succinct.
no, but I think it's good to say it like that, because one of the things that we notice that as we do our podcast as well, and we read other people's comic books and a lot of independent comic creators, if you do something that you're passionate about, it shows in each page.
Mhm.
It shows in the story. It shows in the art. And maybe perhaps you're weaker in the art, but it definitely shows in the story and the passion, that kind of thing. So there's a lot to be said about really being passionate about the project you're presenting to the world.
Yeah, and just to just to put something out, and the first thing that you do is gonna be bad. Like it's and it should, and I'm saying that, and it sounds like a negative thing, but I do kind of think about it as being a positive thing, because if you look back, and I look back at For Molly Part 1, and I'm like, oh no, oh God, what were you thinking? Like with a couple of parts, or a couple, not with any of Ben's work. Ben's great. But with the way that I whatever, but that's a good thing, because that means that I'm improving. That means
Yeah.
that I'm thinking about things in a different way, where I'm getting better at writing to this style, because comic writing is different from writing a novel. It's different from writing a TV show. It's different from writing a movie screenplay, and getting more comfortable in that format, so that if I'm not noticing mistakes in things that I'd done 4 years ago now, then that means that I probably haven't improved, and that's not a good thing. I need to be improving, and so you put out something bad in the hopes that, and in the confidence that the next thing that you write is going to be the best thing you've ever written, because
Mhm.
you know you're constantly trying to get better. You're constantly trying to put out the best work that you possibly can. So, the last thing that I wrote is the best thing I've ever written, and the next thing I'm going to write is going to be the best thing I've ever written. So that means that, you just got to keep going. And again, it's the power of forward momentum.
That's awesome.
Definitely. My husband is an independent creator, and he likens the progress of his art from the very beginning to what it is now, to the very early beginnings of The Simpsons, when The Simpsons were very, very first on the Tracy Ullman show, and they were like very choppy and like just so gritty, and even just like the voices were just so weird.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at now, they're like what, the longest still running TV series in existence.
Yeah.
But they continue to grow and to work on it. And he says the same thing. He looks at the first one and he cringes, but then he looks at the his most recent and he's like, wow, like I've really um evolved in his craft. So
Yeah. And it's
definitely,
so
I
gratifying to get to that point. It's so awesome to see other creators get to that point. I mean, Like one of the coolest things I see on artists' Instagrams or Twitters is like, this is what I drew 5 years ago, and this is the same
Mhm.
subject, but what I'm drawing like now, like that's so cool. Like,
Yeah.
you love seeing that in other creators.
Yeah, I love those posts too, where they do their then and now stuff. It's really cool. So I actually am interested to know about something that I forgot what I was going to ask you about because we went off. I went off on a tangent about The Simpsons.
Well, I'm always willing to talk about The Simpsons.
um, but we'll go with my question that I do know, and then maybe I'll remember what I was going to ask you. But the Kickstarter is going to begin on March 17th. I know you can always go to Kickstarter and do a search for Into the Wilderness, but is there keywords or something that they can look for, or is there a website they can go to find your project?
Yeah, I'm like you said, I think that the best way on Kickstarter is either searching my name, Gabe Cheng, CHE as in Edward, NG, and then or Into the Wilderness in there. And like I said, it's going to be March 17th through March 31st. So it's a quick Wednesday to Wednesday 2-week campaign.
Oh, yeah, that is quick.
Yeah, it's I found that sometimes with the smaller projects, or at least with Love at First Bite, it was get it done quick, get it done, and have it be a lot of stuff packed into a short amount of time instead of kind of spreading it out too thin and not having enough stuff to cover a long 4-week campaign. So we'll see if that bears out. That might be the wrong thing to do. So either way, we're gonna find out.
Okay. Okay.
And then
I remembered. Oh, go ahead.
Just quickly, my website is gabechengcomics.com. My Instagram, my Twitter is Gabe Cheng Comics, at Gabe Cheng Comics, and that's how people can find me.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. And I remember my question because you talked about, I saw on your website that you are a podcaster, and because you talked about it right now as well, I wanted to ask you about your podcast and give you the opportunity to plug that as well.
Sure. My podcast is called Another Lousy Millennium. I've done it for the last 4 years with my brother Luke. We are a Futurama fan podcast, so we talk about the show Futurama episode by episode. We are in the middle of publishing our season 10 episodes, and that's
wow.
So we have published up to the middle of the last season, but we have recorded up to the end of the series. So we're figuring out what we're going to do next, but it's going to be a lot of cool stuff, and hopefully it'll be a lot of expanding stuff. But if people out there listening right now are huge Futurama fans like I am, we have gone through every single episode and talked about it, and what are the references, what are the jokes, what are the the Star Trek gags that are in there, or what is this making fun of, this and that. And it's been a really great ride. It's been a lot of fun, and it's, like I said, it's wrapping up in the next year, but it's going to lead to some cool things with my brother and I as we continue to do a podcast together.
Oh, cool.
Super cool. That is really awesome. Well, you already told us about your website and your social media. What secrets do you have to updating that information? I mean, do you do it weekly, monthly?
It depends on kind of what's coming down the pipeline. I think that for the website, it just gets updated as far as like just kind of what's happening next. So there's been some changes as far as Into the Wilderness stuff. As far as social media, I mean, social media is a white whale that I've yet to
full-time job.
Yeah, that I've yet to slay. I haven't quite gotten to the point where I'm beating the algorithm or even having figured out the algorithm. So I don't have any advice for people about what to do on social media because everything I'm doing is not working. It's so I'm trying to think about what potentially I can do that is going to be yeah, is going to help me to kind of gain followers and beat the algorithm a little bit. But as the writer, I'm not the artist, so I'm not like doing sketches every day. It's difficult to come up with visual content, but I'm trying to crack that code. Um, so yeah, but that being said, there will be previews of Into the Wilderness. There will be some other content where I'm going to do a behind the scenes video about how I kind of write and collaborate with Elisa. I'm going to post that on the Kickstarter page and on all my social media. And one other thing I'm going to start doing on social media. Well, I don't remember, but let's just say that it's a tune in and find out what it is. And
That's super
it's
cool.
thank you.
Well, so this sounds amazing. I really, really love the story. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of the story with us via PDF. We're very lucky to have read it. Um, I know that in For Molly, in your campaign, you had variant covers. I think you had an art noir kind of. No, what was it? The kind of 1930s look. The
Yeah.
cover. Yeah.
Oh, Art Deco.
Art Deco. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any variant covers for Into the Wilderness?
I'm sorry, Art Nouveau. I'm so bad at
Nouveau.
that. I
Me
always
too.
mess
I'm
that
like,
up.
dude, I just did the same thing. I was
Yeah, and it's my
no.
work. I'm well, thank you first of all for saying that you guys liked it. That's I'm very, very happy. I'm so excited about this book. It took me a while to kind of figure out how it all fit together in my head, and it took me a while to break the story, but when it finally kind of all laid out, I was really happy with it. And I'm so lucky to be working with Elisa. She's incredible. And so my variant cover artist is named Colleen Palmer, like I said, at Pixel Gremlin on social media. I found her on Upwork, and I put out a posting that was like, I need a variant cover artist. She responded with her portfolio, and it was very dark and very like horror comic and lots of shadows and black shapes and things like that. And I was like, first of all, I thought that her art style was great. And second, I was like, wow, this is so different from Elisa that this would be the perfect variant cover companion for this story.
Mhm.
So those were my first two thoughts. My third thought was she uses a lot of halftone dots, and I'm like, I love halftone dots, and I put that into my message with her, and it was part of our interview conversation. And she's like, I love halftone dots too, and I'm like, great. And so I'm happy to say there's a bunch of really cool halftone dots in the variant cover. But yeah, workshopping that variant cover with her was so cool. I sent her, kind of, I didn't have a clear of an idea for the variant cover as I did for the main cover with Elisa. So I sent her a bunch of kind of abstract things, that I had that seemed like they might be a little bit disparate, that very dissimilar to each other, but and they just came together really, really well. And I'm really excited to reveal that. That'll be coming out on my social media in a couple of weeks, closer to the campaign. Cool. But that will be, like I said, that will be offered as a reward. Not only the print, but also having that as the actual cover for the print of the comic. So very excited to work with her. Very excited for all the art in the campaign and in the book.
That is super awesome.
Nice.
Thank you for sharing the 14 pages of story. It was really amazingly done, and you could see and you could feel the passion while reading the story and seeing the art and everything. So I feel like this is a project really close to your heart. And then you talking about the development of the characters and how there's a whole backstory that you had already thought up. I mean, that really goes, I think it goes above and beyond. I mean, I don't know anything about the writing process, but to me that sounds amazing. So thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing that information with us.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I am so grateful for the opportunity to talk about it. And I'm really glad that you both liked it. That means a lot that people like it.
And Jen is not here, but we talked to her about it before because she was with us earlier before she had to leave, and she said she really liked it.
I'm glad.
Yeah,
That
most
really
definitely.
makes me happy.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us about your Kickstarter that's coming up. And so I highly suggest everybody out there listening to this or just watching this interview, check that out or have it. Maybe you can follow Gabe on Kickstarter, and maybe it'll show up whenever you refresh your feed. But thank you so much for being here today on our Las Platicas episode. We have been your hosts. I'm Sarah.
I'm Kristen, and
And
there's no
no,
Jen.
Jen. But don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, Gabe, for coming on the show. Thank you so much. And also be sure to like and subscribe out there. Remember, we have a raffle coming up, so please do comment so you could be entered in the raffle. Thank you so much for being here today. We have been your host. I'm Sarah. Oh, we already
And
said that.
I'm
Chris,
Kristen again.
and we have the pleasure of talking to Gabe today. Thank you so much, guys.